Hey, and welcome to the third PowerPoint for U.S. history titled North America, focusing on the Spanish. So this PowerPoint will be focusing on Central America and how the Spanish first arrived into this area for the beginning of American history. So the very beginning of the 1500s, so this would be directly after Columbus, this is after Amerigo Vespucci. They had discovered that this is new land, this is new territory, and they started moving into the area of what would be Central America and Mexico, present-day Mexico, and those places, and they started actually beginning to see what kind of people they could find in this area, and their goal was to find gold, of course. So, conquering the Incas, that was one of the first things that they did. So the Incas were located in present-day Peru in the early 1500s. So that is in South America. So that would have been for one of the first places they started to explore. They were known for being uncivilized, but a very dominant culture in South America. Their society was based on social rank and lacked the use of currency. In 1533, so again, we're 30 years after those first explorers arrived over here, Francisco Pizarro led an army into the Incan capital. Pizarro killed the Incan ruler and conquered the Inca. So you have to understand that during this time, the Spanish had advanced tools, advanced war methods, their fighting techniques were better. These people that lived in North and South America, they weren't as advanced as the Spaniards that were arriving in North and South America, so they had a hard time defending themselves. So Pizarro had superior weapons and access to horses to help defeat the Incas. Remember, prior to the Spanish arriving, horses did not exist in North and South America. They were the ones that brought them here. So that was an advantage that the Spanish had. Also, the Incas were subjected to diseases they had no immunity against. So as a Spaniard would come across, they might be carriers of a disease, even though they're not sick, and they might bring that disease with them. And because the Incas had never been exposed to it, they were a lot weaker, and their immunity was a lot weaker than the Spaniards, and they would pass away a lot easier through those diseases. All right, so moving on to the next slide, conquering the Aztecs. So we just talked about the Incas who were located in South America. These were the Aztecs. They were located kind of in central Mexico, kind of where the capital is now, where Mexico City is. So they were located in present-day Mexico in the early 1500s. They were a very brutal and harsh tribe of natives. They believed in human sacrifice. Not of their own people, but they would capture local tribe members, and they would bring them to their... This picture over here to our right is a picture of some of their worship pyramid towers. And they would bring those people to those towers, and they would sacrifice them to the sun god. They were very high on the sun god. And that's who they believed in, and they would sacrifice humans. So they basically would cut them open and bleed them out in order to honor the sun god. Very brutal, very, very... dangerous group of people. There is a movie called Apocalypto that is about the Aztecs, and it's very eye-opening. If you're ever interested in learning about the Aztecs, it's not a documentary or anything, it's an actual movie, and it's called Apocalypto. So moving on a little bit, so in 1519, Hernan Cortez arrived in the capital city riding a white horse in full armor. So Cortez was a Spaniard. He arrived in the Aztec capital, which was called Tenochtitlan, and he showed up. And the Spaniards were all on horses, and the Aztecs had never seen a horse. And he was in full armor, like had had metal shields and headgear and everything. His horse had armor on it. They had never seen something that looked like that. So initially, the Aztecs believed that Cortez was a god. And so they let him right into their community. They let him into their capital city. Even the actual ruler of the Aztecs bowed down to Cortez and gave him whatever he wanted. So he successfully defeated the Aztecs because he had better weapons, and they didn't know what to make of him. They believed him to be some kind of special figure, and he easily defeated them. They died too from diseases that they were not immune against. And so Cortez tore the city apart, the original Aztec capital city of Tenochtitlan, and he rebuilt the city and named it Mexico City. So in present-day Mexico City is where that original capital was for the Aztecs. All right, so moving on to the next slide. So the effects of conquering in the New World. So the effects of Pizarro conquering the Incas and Cortez conquering the Aztecs, the explorers brought back stories of riches, gold, and silver to Europe. So as soon as they conquered these places, they would set sail back. Not all of them. I mean, obviously, some of them stayed and kept up order there. But as they would sail back to Europe, they would tell them, oh, there was riches and gold, and as the stories grew, they got even more elaborate and over the top. And so people became excited about the possibilities of exploring America. So, or at this time, this unknown land of North and South America. So more explorers were encouraged to become conquistadors. So conquistadors are explorers or conquerors. So as the stories came back, Europeans were excited. I want to become a conquistador. I want to go conquer somebody. So European rulers were at little risk to themselves because the conquistadors were the ones risking their lives and wealth. So countries like Spain were gaining everything. People were so eager to go explore the new area that Spain didn't have to ask people to go. They just did. They just went. And it was a benefit. It was a benefit for the actual countries and not the people themselves because it was extremely dangerous. All right, so Spain and France conflict in Florida. So at the same time, they're exploring all of the Gulf of Mexico and Florida, which obviously the peninsula of Florida hangs down into the Gulf of Mexico. It became kind of a hot ground for this. Everybody wants this piece of land. So in 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon was a Spanish explorer who claimed Florida. He was searching for the Fountain of Youth, which, rumor has it, there was this spring of water that you could drink from, and you would be young forever. Kind of like a whole Tuck Everlasting thing, but, even back then they believed in something like that. He set up a colony in Florida and became the governor. So De Leon became Florida's governor. France was interested in claiming Florida to capture Spanish cargo ships. So John Ribault was a French explorer who established a French colony in Florida. This angered the Spanish, so they attacked and killed the French and stopped the colony. So here became kind of the very beginning of the battles that would occur between Spain and France and even later Britain, that the battle over who's going to control America, who's got staked claims for this, who's going to have this land, who's going to own this land, and who's going to conquer it and rule it and grow their own colonies there. So this was just the beginning. And at that point in time, the Spanish had defeated the French in Florida. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So other Spanish explorers, so we're going to talk about a few of them here. We talked about some of these more in depth last year in New Mexico history, but we'll just go over a few of them right here. So we have Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. He traveled across the southwest, eventually reaching Mexico. So the first map here is Cabeza de Vaca's route. Remember, he he's the one that shipwrecked in Florida, was held captive by the local Indian tribe, and then escaped with him and one other man, or two other men, and they walked along the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, up and down and all around, and then once they got kind of into Texas, they began hearing stories about the seven cities of gold. So that was the legend of Cibola. And remember, he had people with him, and they all believed, oh, these natives keep telling us about these seven cities of gold. Then when he gets back down to Mexico City and he starts telling these stories and people start searching for the seven cities of gold, come to find out there was no such thing. The only thing they could ever come up with were the villages of Zuni that the sand made them look like gold, but there was never any proof that there were the seven cities of gold or Cibola, as it's been told. So he was the one that spread that rumor. Cabeza de Vaca was. Then you had Hernando de Soto. He explored the southeastern United States, and he crossed the Mississippi River. So the second map picture there is of what he did. So he wound up all around in the southeast of the United States, found the Mississippi River, but what you got to understand is I'm sure he came across uniquely wonderful things in his journey, just like Cabeza de Vaca did, but they were searching for gold. They were not searching for new land or the possibility of farming or anything like that. They were searching for gold, and they were finding very little of that, if none at all. The last explorer that we're going to talk about on this page, and his map is down at the very bottom down there, is Francisco Vasquez de Coronado. He is actually one of the people who searched for the seven cities of gold. He searched for Cibola, obviously not having any luck finding Cibola, and he came up through New Mexico and through the Southwest, and when he did, his men were the first to really encounter the Native American tribes of the Southwest. His crew also saw the Grand Canyon for the first time and the Great Plains, and he basically claimed that the Southwest was just a useless piece of land. Which, I mean, at the time, I'm sure it did look that way, but he did not find any gold like he had hoped for. All right, so moving on to the next slide are Spanish settlements. So if you've been around New Mexico very much, you can see that a lot of New Mexico's, especially not so much in our area, but as you move over to Albuquerque and Santa Fe and into the central part of the state, you can tell that New Mexico was created by the Spanish, has a lot of Spanish influence in the architecture of the buildings and the old churches and things. So some of the Spanish settlements, the terms that you use are the pueblos. So that first picture is of a pueblo. Towns that were centers of trade. Remember, they're multi-storied leveled houses. This is a more modern day one because obviously there's a door on the bottom level. Then you have missions, which were religious communities that wanted to spread Christianity to natives. Missions were set up all over the United States once the Spanish started arriving. They were designed to help the natives commit and practice Christianity, which most of them did not want to do, but that's what they were designed to do. Presidios were Spanish forts. Basically, they were the government. They often had soldiers in them or important leaders. And a plantation was a large farm. Plantations were found all over the United States, and they often had a lot of workers that were there. Some of them were slaves, some of them were not. Sometimes you hear that plantations were just large farms, which is exactly true. Slavery is often associated to that, but it's not always. They didn't always have slavery with plantations. Okay, next slide is Bartolomé de las Casas. He was a Spanish priest who believed Native Americans deserved to be treated better by the newcomers or the Spanish. So he was one of the first people to arrive here that actually was on the side of Native Americans, who said, we can't mistreat these people. These people were here first. They actually know the land better than us. They have adapted to this area. We need to actually treat them better. So he convinced the Spanish to pass laws to make it illegal to enslave Native Americans. That wasn't always true. People always found a way around those kind of laws, but he pushed for that, which was a very good thing. And he was an influential priest of his time, which a lot of people were on the side of the right thing to do back then. It just didn't always happen that way. All right, so again, this is our last slide. This will be the first PowerPoint of two-part PowerPoint, where next week you'll get a second PowerPoint and then you'll have a quiz. So make sure that you are reviewing the PowerPoints and that you are listening and paying attention, because you need to absorb a lot of this information in order to take the quiz. If you need to take notes, whatever you need to do to make sure that you have the information that you need. All right. Excuse me. If you have any questions, message me. And that's it for this week.